7mm Remington Magnum for a friend of mine, Nick Tacito. David is going to help me out in terms of zeroing the rifle and shooting it at the range. We're doing a load development using the Barnes LRX 145 grain lead-free bullet, and we're looking for a sub-MO8 group, and with some luck, maybe a little skill, not sure, but we'll have the gun shooting sub-MOA hopefully like around half a minute. That's our goal, and we'll see what we can do. The one thing I want to let everybody know today is that I have no certificate or certification in reloading or hand loading, and what I'm going to show you today is based on my over 40 years of experience in reloading. I always refer to the bullet manufacturer's reloading manual. I shoot the same powder matched to the bullet, or in other words, one manufacturer of 150 grain or 180 grain bullet, the bearing surface and the pressures that that bullet may produce are different than that of a different manufacturer. So the best way to load is to follow the specific manufacturer's reloading information as best you can, and that information may be limited in terms of powder selections, and you may have to kind of go off on your own on the charts. And to do that, you will need to learn what the basic fundamentals are of safety practices in hand loading, and start at minimum load levels for development and work your way up, looking for pressure signs and things of that nature. Very important thing to remember is working with powder and primers are very explosive devices, and they can cause serious injuries. So be as safe as you can. And one thing some people kind of take for granted is it's a good idea to put on your safety glasses, and always keep these on while you're reloading for safety reasons. And if there's a little bit of flash or something like that, it may be the difference of you being able to see or recover from some kind of disaster. For this demonstration and video, though, I will not be wearing my glasses because I'm trying to minimize the glare that may reflect back into the camera. So with that in mind, I'll take my safety glasses off, and we'll go ahead through this little tutorial and show you how to properly reload ammunition. One of the first important things in getting ready for loading is making sure that the weapon system we're using is accurized, and every nut, bolt, screw, everything is attached really well and to spec. This is a Model 70 pre-64 model design in the 7mm Remington Magnum. I took off the old scope that was on the rifle. It only had a 30mm bell. This one now has a 42mm bell with a 3-to-9 objective. It's a Redfield 5-star. It's their elite or deluxe model scope at the time. It's in the duplex format. We're mounted on Bueller mounts and bases. Can't buy those anymore, but that excellent mount, excellent base. Some of the things we did was we took the gun apart. The screws that were holding the action were just finger tight, and we took that apart, cleaned everything up. There was a little forward tension up here on the front end, on the fore end of the stock, and so what we did was we filed it so that there's no contact from barrel to stock, and that'll work in adverse weather conditions, maintaining the same point of impact. The other thing we did was we bedded the action. We glass bedded that. Did a little trigger work, took some creep out of the trigger, and lightened it a little bit. So it's right now around 2.5 pounds, and it breaks very crisp and very clean. And last but not least, what we've done to the rifle is we put a Sims Vibration Laboratory butt plate here, and so it's about 1 inch thick or so. We took the old butt plate off. We mounted this one on, and it minimizes shock absorption or recoil, the felt recoil, by up to 70%. Additionally, the powder charge that we loaded for the gun, we backed it off a little bit, again to minimize recoil and yet have extreme accuracy. We're not loading for velocity, we're just loading for accuracy and a kind of a mild recoil. Bullet placement is the most important thing, and that is our goal. We've already worked up the powder charge in half-grain increments until we found the most accurate powder. Now that we found the most accurate powder, the next step that we're going to demonstrate is seating the bullet and adjusting it by 0.010 of an inch at a time. That will also aid in shrinking the group and making a tighter group pattern. Barnes recommends to start the seating depth somewhere between 40 and 70 thousandths of an inch off the lance as a starting point. I make my own case lube. It's better than any proprietary lube. And so this is what we use. I have a 99% isopropyl alcohol purchased from Safeway stores. But you want the highest concentration alcohol. The idea is to not have as much moisture. The difference, the 1% in this case, is water. So this is the carrier for the lube that we're making, and then the other part of the lube is we use the liquid lanolin, usually picked up from a health food store or something like that, or 1 ounce to 12 ounces of the isopropyl alcohol. Once mixed, I put it into my own case lube, and every time I go to use the lube, you have to shake it a few times, and then a couple sprays. That'll work nice and smooth. With the lube, I either put it into like a Tupperware or a plastic bowl or something like that to mix the brass. I can do 50, 100 at a time. In this case, we're going to do 5, and it only takes 1, maybe 2 squirts, no more than that. And then I use a 1 gallon Ziploc bag works really well also. You know, just anything to contain it. You want it to be nice and clean. Mix it around a little bit. All you have to do, take it out of the bag, set your brass aside, take it out of the bag, and wait 2-3 minutes for the lube to dry. Okay, this is a 2-die set. CBS. They're full-length resizing die. So we're going to set up the full-length resizing die right now. At this time, important thing is to make sure that the deep priming pin is out about 3/16 of an inch, or just so that the bottom where you see this on the internal portion is back enough so it's not hitting the base of the case. You want to run it all the way down into the shell plate till you make contact. Once you make contact, you want to lift up the arm just a little bit. Run the die down about 1/4 to 1/2 a turn, and that should be set. So what you want is this to cam over. So when you run it into the die, it hits the base of the die, and then the arm just slightly cams. That's a perfect die adjustment. The headspace is right where the shoulder meets the corner of the cartridge on the edge. So the halfway between the case bottleneck here and this shoulder is where you're measuring head space. Measure the head space. I use this gauge that goes on the set of calipers, and it works in the same fashion as the bullet comparator, only this is measuring the head space at the shoulder. We want to move it about 3/1000ths. Run it up into the die, all the way up and all the way out. And you can see the lubricity of this case. I can do this several times over and over. There's no proprietary lubricant that we can use resizing a case that'll recycle that many times into the press. Now we're going to check it again after resizing it to see if we've minimized or constricted the case a little bit. Okay, we moved it 3/1000ths. That die is set just perfectly. Next is to trim the brass to spec. Refer to your reloading manual for the proper spec. Primer pocket uniforming is an important part of the process. We do that one time in the life of the case. Using the Frankfurt Arsenal Case Prep Center. This is the trim to length right here. It's already been adjusted. So I trimmed it, and you can see right here that it's trimmed pretty good. So next thing we'll do is we'll deburr the outside, we'll ream the inside. Primer pocket uniform the inside here so the primer sits evenly. So the inside looks just like that, you can see it. And we'll finish the rest of the brass. We'll do it all the same way. Primer brass now, and I'm using the Lee priming tool, handheld, and we can feel the kind of pressure that we're putting so that we get a consistent seat on our primer. So you just insert it into the press, run the ram up like this, makes full contact, and we take it out, and it's perfectly primed right there. So we usually check it right here to make sure that we're below the surface, and it's seated perfectly. The next step is to set up our Hornady auto charge for the proper charge weight. As you can see in setting up the powder charge, I leave the bottle of powder sitting right next to it so that we don't mix powders by accident later down the road. We're using RL22 powder in the powder measurer, and so I have the container put to the side. That way there's no question which powder we're using. The powder measurer has been turned on and it's been sitting here for about 15 minutes warming up. We'll remove the protective cover. We don't need this while we're measuring the powder charge. We'll make sure our powder pan is clear and clean. We'll put this powder pan to the side for now, and then we'll calibrate the scale. So first thing we will do is we'll zero the scale. And the next thing that we'll do is hit calibrate once, and then hit it a second time until you get some dashes. When it gives you the number for the calibration weight, go ahead, put the calibration weight on, hit calibrate, wait, it gives you some dashes, and then it'll give you another weight. So we'll grab the second weight, put it on, and we'll hit calibrate one more time. We are now calibrated and the scale is ready for accurate measure. Next step is we need to enter our charge weight. In this case, we hit 610, which stands for 61.0 grains, and then we hit enter. Okay, the next thing you do is just simply press the dispense mode, and it'll start dispensing powder. We've dispensed the correct amount of powder. The scale is set up. Let's try it one more time. We just want to make sure when we get into a routine, let it stabilize, and it'll start dispensing. Now that we have the proper powder charge, we're getting ready to insert the bullet. And just to show you what we're using today, the Barnes LRX bullet, 145 grain, 2.284 diameter. And there are a couple knurls in there, and that's to minimize bearing surface. The bullet's much longer than a lead bullet, and to stabilize the bullet in flight and not foul the barrel. That's what these grooves are for. So, no further ado, let's go ahead and set up the die. Okay, to set the die up correctly for the seating die, back the seating stem off a few turns, and then go ahead and run it into the die. Just get it started, don't put it in all the way. Take a piece of brass, put it into the shell holder, and run it all the way up to the top. Now, run your die until you hit the case mouth. Once you hit the case mouth, then back the die off about a half a turn so that you don't make contact. We're not crimping the bullet in this case because the bullet we're using has no cantilever. We're using 145 grain Barnes LRX bullet. It's a ballistic coefficient of 486, so it's fairly high and good. It's an excellent bullet for long range. Now what we'll do is I've run this screw down to the proper length of the bullet, and I'm going to back it off about 10 thousandths for the next round. So we just slide the bullet in here like so and slowly run the ram up there. And we'll check our overall length. For seating the die properly, we're going to use a bullet comparator from Hornady, and this here we put onto our calipers. This measures to the ogive of the bullet, and the ogive of the bullet is where the bullet starts to taper off. So where it's the most concentric or the largest diameter of the bullet, just before it tapers, it is what we're measuring. Now that we seated the bullet, let's check the overall length and see if we've made it to spec. We have to spin the bullet in place here to make sure that it's square to the caliper. And indeed, it is to spec. Okay, we've now completed our test rounds. I have 4 different loads, 3 rounds each load, and I moved it up 10 thousandths at a time, trying to find that sweet spot where the gun really likes the bullet and where it's seated. So let's go to the range. David's going to shoot, and we'll see which load is most accurate.
So we've adjusted the seating depth, and we're going to try and shrink the group size down a more accurate round. My godfather, Nick Tecito. I'm zeroing his rifle today, and this is how we set up the chronograph. And this is how we set up the crowning. Now we'll shoot our first test load. 3,031 feet a second. You should allow 15 minutes between each shot segments for the barrel to properly cool down. Now finished our test loads. Now we're going to head downrange and see which load was the most accurate. We are now downrange, and we're going to review the targets for shot placement. So this right here looks like this is the group and the load that we'll go with. Now we'll go back to the reloading room and make our final loads to zero the rifle.
Hilarious.
Ready?
No.
Alrighty, Nick. Well, after last season with the poopy puppy, I figured I'd give you the opportunity to meet Maddie.
Hello.
And she has done the liberty for you of breaking your gun in and giving it its blessing for the year.
There you go.
So now you will kill the biggest buck of your life.